Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen, and I'm joined by my usual broadcast partner, former NHL defenseman Tom Laidlaw. Played 11 seasons in the NHL with the New York Rangers and Los Angeles Kings. This is the Laidlaw and Allen Report. We come to you twice a week to talk all things hockey. Tom, plenty to talk about, but I think we have to start with the Vancouver Canuck. Reports are, I think both TSN and ESPN reported that now more than 20 members of the Canucks have been tested positive, and not only for COVID, but for that new Brazilian strain, which I guess is based on some of the things we've seen on Twitter, has really been difficult for the players to handle, and for everyone who has contracted it. I guess it's just a little more challenging to get through.
Wow, I didn't realize that. I didn't know that new strain. Huh?
Yeah. Or at least some of them. At least some of the ones have tested. I'm not sure everybody has, but some of the one. But I saw Gaudreau's wife mentioned on Twitter that he had had a difficult time, and there's just more to it. Like the symptoms seem to be, more significant. But from the NHL's perspective, this is going to be challenging because they're not going to be ready until later on this week. And I think we're now reaching the possibility, and it's less of a problem because the Canucks, may not be in the race, but we could be in a position where they just won't play 56 games if those games are meaningless.
Well, they're 37 now. Yeah.
Yeah. Imagine if this had happened to one of the front runners,
and you're right, but the problem is those front runners are going to be playing against Vancouver, right? You're going to be missing those games, right?
Yeah, but if it doesn't, we'll have to see who they're against. But if it doesn't adjust the standings, I think they won't play them. Your point's well taken. What you're suggesting is if it's a difference between finishing first or second, right, where that changes your opponent in the postseason. And I'll tell you what, even though this is creating some havoc for the league now, as we're approaching, normally we'd be approaching the end of the season, but we got a ways to go into the system this year. It's really, they've done a decent job. Like there was a period there when it looked like we were going to have a lot of trouble. And then I think everybody said, we've got to work a little harder. And they really have sort of stayed away. I mean, they've had issues, but it's not like we felt that the season was going to be canceled at any point.
Like Dallas is really, at first they were missing a lot of games, and now they're up, they're 36 games, where everybody else is at like 37, 38, 39. So they're closer. Yeah.
But here's a question for you. The fact they started the season with COVID, has that impacted all the way through now? I mean, they were in the finals last year, and maybe this was going to happen whether we had COVID or not, but because it did feel like they had overachieved to get to the final. And Khudobin played the series of his life, and Jamie Benn sort of became the Jamie Benn of old. But you wonder too, if you're starting out and everybody's a little weak from COVID, and you haven't practiced, and you dig yourself a hole. It's not like they came out guns blazing. So I'm sure COVID has had an impact on the competition. It can't help but.
I agree. You look at Zibanejad here, and again, I don't know if he had really struggled early in the season. And I don't know for sure if that was because of COVID. He did have COVID, but now he's playing like the Zibanejad he was last year before the break. So, I think you're right. But again, you're right on. I think it has affected teams in different ways. But again, I hate to say it this way, it's fair for everybody or unfair for everybody, I guess.
Well, I think all the time about, I've learned through, my friendship with you, the way hockey players think. And Zibanejad kept saying when the reporters would ask him, do you think it's the residue of COVID that's causing this? And because he's a hockey player, at least that's what I've learned from you, he said no, because he didn't want to make excuses.
Yeah, totally.
But I think all of us who are looking from the outside in, who don't have that player mentality, we're thinking, well, it has to, because he was so good last year and he didn't forget how to play.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like he's not working hard.
Right.
So there had to be another reason. Well, you know, the reason clearly was he fatigued from COVID? Was he weakened by COVID? You know, because he wasn't even close to being the same player. And now he's back being, you know, if he could play the Flyers every day, he could set records.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, and he is. And he's playing with that energy. Like when he was playing last year at his best hockey, like he was an all out, like he wasn't just one of those guys that's this graceful guy out there, although he's a great skater. It was effort out there. I mean, the skill, knowing the game, playing hard, he was doing it all. So yeah, for sure. I wanted to talk to you about, because while I've been gone, I've been in South Carolina visiting my daughter, and you know, there were two games that I paid attention to, and as I was watching the results of both those games, I asked myself, are we going to be looking back at the end of the season and saying these two games? And the two games were Pittsburgh and Boston played. It looked like Pittsburgh was going to win that game, and then Boston ended up winning it. Yeah. And then Buffalo and the New York Rangers, and Buffalo beating the Rangers 3-2. Yeah. And you know what? You got to give some credit. We never want to give credit where credit is due when it involves a losing team. But if you look at the way Buffalo has played over the last 5 or 6 games, it's been a different team. And you know, they went, and I don't have it in front of me, but they had like 8 or 9 games where they gave up 5 or more goals out of like 13 of their games. They were giving up 5 or more. And then in the last 5 games, they haven't given up 5 goals. And every game has been a close game, or they've won it. You know, so they're playing better. They have found their pride. And let's face it, I mean, they were subject to ridicule. I was among them, saying, oh, totally.
You know, that they, you know, where was their pride? And where, you know, they say you can't fire a whole team, but I think you could fire about 45 to 50% of that team. Yeah. And start all over again.
Well, I know, and it's just, and again, I think we forget sometimes too, the difference between winning and losing, especially at the NHL level, is really not a whole lot, right? I mean, that confidence, you know, to make the play, to make a good offensive play, the attention to detail, you know, you start getting into that rut there too, where especially with a younger team, where you're saying like, I don't want to really do anything out here because I don't want to stick out. I don't want to try to do something, then make a mistake, and now I'm going to be the one that's the reason we've lost another game. And you see, I've been part of teams where that's happened. So it's, you know, now they start to win a few games. They start to feel better about themselves. The pressure's off. The losing streak is over with. So now they start to make some plays again. But you're right. I mean, it is pride, but it's, again, especially with a younger hockey team, it's really having that mental toughness to fight through and just be willing to say this. I'm going to work as hard as I can. If I fall down and make a mistake, I fall down and make a mistake. But no, it is, I mean, it's great to see them do well. The Rangers, though, I mean, they were really playing on a roll, like you said. They were playing pretty well against Washington and Philadelphia too. Yeah. Washington especially is a pretty good hockey team, but that's going to hurt the Rangers because, you know, they need, and you did math there last week. I think you were talking about they needed to, you know, really have a strong schedule or a strong finish here, and so that losing that point hurts them. Yeah, no. Now all of a sudden we're at the point like they're already in playoff mode. I mean, they have to view these games as playoff games. Right. Speaking of Buffalo, real quick, going back to them, and Susan again comes up with another good comment. Taylor Hall. So I hear a lot of rumors about him being the guy who's going to get traded, and I can see why Buffalo would want to trade him. He's on a 1-year contract, but man. Like if I'm another team, like do I want him on my? Like if I'm a contending team, like it's only going to be a contender that's going to get him. And what contending team wants the Taylor Hall that we see playing now? I mean, maybe the Taylor Hall that played 3 or 4 years ago, but the Taylor Hall that's playing now, I don't know if I want him. Yeah, but don't you think there's always the potential for him to play better with a team that's winning? And always we kind of set the marketplace a little bit, and I thought the Stahl trade where it was a 3rd and a 5th, as I recall, like that. Like Stahl's is a pretty valuable player. So now what that tells me is teams are saying, look, we want to add guys, but we don't want to be stupid about it. Right. So if you could get Taylor Hall and it's no longer a 1st-round pick and a prospect, sure. I mean, don't you just at least
try it. But as always, Susan is right on. Like, he has not been the MVP Taylor Hall that we've seen, and he hasn't been for a while.
Yeah.
So, and there's always now we shouldn't be at the point where his wheels start to fall off or anything. He's not that old,
But geez, yeah, I hear you. I guess, and I hear you totally. As long as you're not giving up like too high a draft pick for him, or you're not giving up too much,
right.
You shouldn't give up any prospects or anything. I guess you'll give him a try. But again, that's that problem. Like, he is one of those guys that former MVP. So it isn't just what you give up for him. So now he's sitting in the locker room, and if he's not one of your top, like, to me, he's got to be one of your top 4 forwards, not just top 6 forwards on a team to really be effective. I mean, if he's sitting in the locker room and he's a healthy scratch because you don't want to take one of your top 6 forwards out of the lineup because he's just not getting it done. I mean, then that's, I guess, come playoff time, everybody sucks it up. But I mean, it kind of sucks the life out of your room a little bit. Again, I don't know him as a player, what he's like in the locker room, but that's the risk you run. He's a high profile guy. He won the MVP. He should be coming in. And if he's not coming in and playing a big role for you, I don't know. I guess it depends on the makeup of your hockey team. If you're going to Colorado and you've got a strong locker roam there, maybe that makes sense to add him. But if I'm Colorado, if I'm Joe Sakic, why do you want to break up the band now with Colorado the way they're playing?
Yeah, all of a sudden and because they weren't really playing all that well.
Yeah.
They were. I remember it wasn't that long ago that they had what I considered a big game with Minnesota because those two teams were so identical in how they've been playing. Well, now that's not the case. Now Colorado's been the team that in the preseason everybody thought had a real good chance to win it all. But going back to Taylor Hall, Tom, as your expertise as a former player, give me some theories on what's happened to Taylor Hall. Because we can't embrace the what we normally do, which is, well, he's just an older player and he's not the player that he was. Yeah. He's not an older player.
Great question. Okay, so I remember when he was the MVP when he played with the Devils, and watching him play, he played like he believed he was the MVP. I watched him play a couple of weeks ago, and he had a break when he tripped over the blue line. It's just that the way Susan said is right. The fall is a mystery. I guess, sure, part of it has to be confidence. But, when you're the MVP, you've proven that you're that level player, and he deserved to be MVP that year. I just think you kind of wonder, it doesn't look like it's a work ethic thing. He looks like he's in shape and everything. I guess his confidence is just shot, but I don't understand how you can go, again, he signed and again, start of the year, I thought it was a great move. Obviously he wasn't getting the contract offers he wanted. So he signed a 1-year deal. So he's betting on himself saying, okay, I can go out and prove how good of a player I am. And yes, I get that Buffalo's not a very good hockey team. He hasn't got much around him, but I think if you're that level of player, like if you put Sidney Crosby on Buffalo, Sidney Crosby would still be Sidney Crosby. Yes, he doesn't have all the tools.
You're not right, he would. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I agree with completely what you're saying on this. It might even be a greater indictment of Taylor Hall that, look, he knows the situation. He knows teams are looking at him as a potential help down the stretch run and in the playoffs, and yet he's still not playing at a high level. Wouldn't you be at that level now where you're going through a brick wall because you want to get out of Buffalo, you want to get with a contending team? I think I'd be inspired to try to earn my way to Colorado or to the Islanders or some team with a shot.
Islanders are good. Yeah, that's a good point. The Islanders, they need scoring, right? So
yeah.
No, I agree with you 100%. And again, it is a mystery because when I remember watching him play, man, when he played that MVP year, I remember he had a breakaway or a shootout goal against Henrik Lundqvist. And he came in, I'll never forget this play because there was so much confidence. He came in like to the top of the circles and rifled a wrist shot right over Henrik Lundqvist's glove into the top corner. It was like, and when he did it, it was like, okay, I'm going to put it there, and that's where I wanted to go, and it's going there. And he was totally confident in himself. And when he scored the goal, it wasn't like it was a big surprise. Hey, I beat Henrik Lundqvist. It was like, no, that's where I want to put it, and I put it there. So he just believed in himself so much. And you watch him play now, and it's just, again, when I watch him, I guess one play, but I watched him trip over the blue line on a breakaway. And the announcers, I think, tried to cover him up a little bit and say, well, he was tired. Okay, so you're tired, but you still don't. Maybe Tom Laidlaw trips over the blue line, but not Taylor Hall. So,
yeah. I wanted to talk also about the Tampa Bay Lightning because I want to get your perspective on this.
That division too. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, but that we know how good that team is. We talk about it all the time. They're up among the leaders in goals scored and goals against. They got the best goalie on the planet in Vasilevsky, and I always give you credit. Before he was drafted, you told me, you told many people, when you were doing analysis for the KHL, you said this guy is going to be unbelievable, and he was the number one. He's the number one goalie in the league right now. But I see how hard it is to maintain that hunger and that edge with this Tampa Bay team, because they should just be moving through like crazy. And they're not. Like they had a bump in the road where they lost 2 or 3. They just split with Detroit. And I get it. They had to play a goalie they hadn't played in a while. But, they just didn't look like the same team yesterday afternoon. Yeah. And, that team is so good. Like they have everything you need to be a dominant team. And yet, they can't pull away. Carolina's too good. And they can't, it's not like they look ready to work their way through the competition in the playoffs. I mean, they may do that, but they don't look like they're ready to do that.
But, and you're totally right. You're not saying anything wrong at all. But I think back, and fortunately or unfortunately, I got to play against the New York Islanders when they were winning their 4 cups in a row. And they had a lot of seasons during that time, too, where it's the same thing, where they didn't, you knew they were good, what they had done. But it wasn't like they blew everybody away during the regular season, but they just knew how to win. In Tampa's case, now they have learned how to win. They know how to win, and they know what they've got there. I mean, I'm just trying to think to myself, if I'm Victor Hedman, for example, like to me, best defenseman in the NHL in my mind, hands down. And he obviously knows how good he is. And we've joked around about how he's kind of a rover out there, that he goes anywhere he wants because he can do that and get away with it. So now you're playing against the Detroit Red Wings. The motivation for them, they're going to make the playoffs. They know that. So the motivation is what? It's it made you want to play good all the time. But yeah, what is your motivation?
Or maybe this doesn't mean anything anymore, but it used to. You're on national television.
Yeah.
You're on the NBC Sunday game of the week. Does that matter anymore? I don't know whether it does or not.
Yeah, I don't know, and especially when the buildings aren't full, there's that electricity in the building, you're coming in at, I don't see, to me, I don't think the NBC game of the week means much to the guys anymore. I just think with Tampa, I don't think they're sitting there saying it, but they're intelligent enough bunch of guys and professional enough saying, okay, we're going to make the playoffs. We know that. We know how to win now. Again, if you're a team that hadn't won before, like I was critical of them in the past, even go back to last year, because I really didn't think they knew how to win the cup yet. Same thing with Washington. They hadn't learned to win the cup yet. So now these teams that have done it, you think to yourself, okay, well, they don't have to have a great regular season. Doesn't mean that they're not, still a contender for the Stanley Cup. It just means that they know what it takes and they're going to make the playoffs. And, and again, I think back to the Islanders, and I remember that a lot, where you're like thinking, like, for us, example, like we could have beat them a few times, but we didn't, because they just knew how to win. So, but I'll tell you, that division, I think we're all, that division with Carolina and Florida and everybody, were thinking that Tampa was just going to run away with it. While those 2 teams in particular, Florida and Carolina, have really,
what's the point spread? I don't have it up.
Yeah, Florida's got, they played 39 games. They got 56 points. Tampa's got 38 games, 54 points. And Carolina's got 37 games. They got 53 points. So, and the winning percentages are all, so actually, Tampa's got the 3rd best winning percentage out of that group. So Florida's at 7-18, Carolina's 7-16, and then Tampa at 7-11. So, yeah, they're the convenience store there.
Yeah.
7-11. Get it?
Yeah, I do. Okay. You were talking about learning how to win, but my wife was not a hockey coach, but she coached soccer at high school level, and right. She kind of taught me something in terms of the viewing of the postseason, and it's kind of altered my thinking. She always called it, it isn't. You don't need to figure out how to win as much as you need to figure out how not to lose. And it was her contention is that you need a team that's able to compete long enough to figure out what they can do to be successful. So, and she called it survival skills. And I've taken that and watched in hockey, and I find that's true in hockey. The best example was the Chicago Blackhawks, who would keep a game when they won their 3 cups. They'd keep those games close until they figured out how to win it.
Yeah.
And because it takes different skills in different games. Sometimes you need to have your goalie be spectacular.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's your offense. Sometimes it's tight defense, not giving up anything. And when you'd watch that Blackhawks team, because the Oilers used to do that too. Like, we think of them as the great Edmonton Oilers offensive machines, but they were capable in the 1980s. If they figured they couldn't win it with offense, they could play defense.
I'll never forget when I got traded out to Los Angeles. We played Edmonton in the first round of the playoffs. Beat them in Northlands Coliseum. I think it was like 7-3 or something like that. Beat them pretty bad in the first game, and you had the feeling like, okay, here they're going to come. They're coming back the next game, and they just dominated us, and they did it in every way, offensively and defensively. And it was, we were still playing the same game we played in the first game when we beat them, but they just. Yeah, you're right. They decide, okay, that's enough now. Now we're going to get serious here. So
and if we need to adjust, we will.
Yeah,
and they always had a much bigger defense than.
Oh yeah,
than people realize. Like, you think of them as their offensive machine, but they had big boys back there.
Randy Gregg,
Steve Smith. Yeah. Charlie Huddy was a thick guy.
Yep.
Craig Muni was a thick guy. They had a bunch of guys that were
Jeff Bukaboom there too. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. They had just a lot of guys that were just and Kevin Lowe was a big guy.
Yeah, he's the same size I was. Yeah.
So he was. So they could do all that. I was going to bring up too, and when I see these kind of things, I like to see them because it tells me that everybody's paying attention.
Yeah.
So the Dallas Stars got a late call that Rick Bowness had tested positive, and even though they were in the middle of a game, and they really think that this was a false positive because he's been fully vaccinated because he's 65 years old.
I didn't know he was vaccinated. Oh,
yeah, he's 65, so he's fully vaccinated. Even though they believed all that, they erred on the side of caution and pulled him right out of that game.
Yeah.
And when I see things like that, and I'm not surprised that Jim Nill is in charge of that team, because that, he is a guy that's always going to put people first.
Yeah.
That's just who he is.
Yeah.
But I did like all that, and I hope that their theory is correct, that it's a false positive. Because what does that mean for those of us who are vaccinated if it isn't? But I really thought that was good that they were on top of that, and I hope they were right on that. So,
definitely. Hey, I got a surprise team for you. It may surprise you who my surprise team is.
Okay.
Surprise team for me is Pittsburgh Penguins, because I really didn't see them as that good of a hockey team this year. But man, they find a way out there. I know they lost to Boston today, but. And they are hanging in there too, and the standings are hanging in there, and watching playing the games, and they're good. I like them the way they play.
Yeah, I had looked at the way that some teams were playing. Like, I look at it in 10-game segments in terms of you've got that's how you make up ground in 10-game segments. If the team you're up against, if they're going 5-5, you got to go 7-3. That kind of thing. And the Rangers actually had a pretty good record over their 10-game, but it wasn't better than Washington's.
That's right.
Penguins, and like Boston, they were better than Boston when I looked. This was 3 or 4 days ago. So and Pittsburgh was right up there. Like, they were 7-2-1 or 7-3, something like that.
6-3-1 in the last 10 now. Yeah.
Yeah, now because they lost that game.
Yep.
But they've played pretty well. And what's interesting about that team, that isn't your older brother's Pittsburgh Penguins team. You look at that roster, and it's not as impressive as it once was. I mean, you still got Crosby and Malkin, and they got wingers. Gunsel's a real player. Rust has turned out to be a very consistent, goal scorer. But Zucker hasn't panned out as well as they'd hoped he would.
Right.
And now then he's been injured. I don't know if he's back, but he was injured. And the rest of that, it's a pretty nondescript
Totally.
lineup. So
I agree.
And
And here's the other team, that Division II, Philadelphia. What are they going to do? I mean, their goaltending right now is not good. Oof. And the guy's supposed to be the future. Carter Hart's supposed to be the future there. He's not there right now.
Yeah, it's too early to give up on him, though. Like if you're going to bring a guy up early, and that was one of the issues that cost Ron Hextall, although I think it was far more complicated than that.
Yeah.
You have to be prepared if he doesn't make it. You can't give up on him when he's when he's young. Like he shouldn't even be in the league based on averages.
Totally.
Like the average goalie I think is like 24 or 25 when he comes up.
Well, and you see Vigneault's comments, the coach there, saying that he just needs to work harder, right? And he was very public. And I've seen Vigneault before he was with the Rangers. He said that with a purpose, right? He's sending a message to the player that he's just not working hard enough. And that's rare to see a coach say that about a goaltender. Maybe they say, well, he needs to work on his confidence or his skill level, whatever. But I mean, when you're not working hard enough, a coach says that publicly about a goaltender, man, that's a pretty.
What's that from a player perspective? Like, what's that mean? Is he not taking enough shots? Is he not spending enough time on the ice?
I think he's not spending enough time on the ice. Getting out there early for practice, working with the goaltender coach. And like as you watch him, and Brian Boucher's former client of ours, a friend of ours, watching him one night that they were playing, and he went into a lot of detail, like kind of breaking down his game, and it was like this, like dropping to his knees too quick, being lazy, getting across the net on plays. And he really detailed like why, just when a goaltender is really playing well and on top of his game, the difference is he's standing up and all this kinds of stuff, and really showed that he just wasn't doing the technical things he needs to do. And you see the great goaltenders. You talk about Vasilevsky, his work ethic apparently is just incredible. In fact, maybe works too hard. Henrik Lundqvist was the same way. Just whatever they had to do to be on top of the game, they did. And again, he's young, like you said, and Carter Hart is a younger player, and that's part of, maybe he had success early, and that's probably one of the dangers of bringing a young goaltender up, that he has success early, and then he thinks, okay, well, I don't have to work as hard because I'm not working my way up anymore. I'm already there, and now he doesn't do the work that he normally would have to do. So that is an indictment, though.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, I think that they're one of the teams that will consider trading for a goalie. The couple that everyone are talking about that being in the marketplace are Bernier of Detroit, who's been injured but is expected back, and Dubnyk in San Jose.
Right.
And so Philadelphia is believed to be one of the teams that's looking.
So okay, so I'm trying to think that through though. So you trade, let's say you trade for Dubnyk. So you trade for Dubnyk, believing then that he's going to be your number one for right now, right?
Yeah.
Right. So Carter Hart, man, you're messing with a young guy's mind. I mean, guy's mind is probably already messed up a little bit right now as it is, but I guess they got to make a plan.
I don't think it's anything the Flyers did. I think he's done it to himself.
Yeah.
He's probably lost that. But I don't see what they have any other options.
But they're 4 points out of a playoff spot. They played 36 games. Boston's ahead of them by 4 points with 34 games played. So, 2 games in the hands from Boston. I guess you got to give it a shot. You got to go get a goaltender.
But, yeah. Oh, for sure. You got to try it. I think they need a defenseman too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, do you just like the plan B? Are you, is it Mark Stahl? Do you give Detroit a 3rd round pick? You plug him in, veteran guy, and then maybe it's just a package. You give it Bernier and would you give up a 2nd, a 3rd for Bernier and?
So Stahl's on last year of his contract. Bernier, I don't know. He is probably
contract. He's around.
Yeah,
he's played very well. Like I think his save percentage is up around 917 or so. At least that's my recollection. And regardless of what his save percentage is, he has played very well for a team that's not very good.
Right. And Stahl, I like Stahl's game. I know he took some heat here in New York, during the rebuild, and they got rid of him. But I like his game, especially for a team like Philadelphia. Just needs somebody to settle things down, right? They're just running around a little bit. But
my observation about him in Detroit, having seen him quite a bit now, is he competes hard every night. Yeah. And that's what Yzerman has liked about him. He has set a very good example for the young Red Wings because he's, you look and he's always around the play.
Right.
Now, the one thing I would say is he's not the fastest player in the league.
There's a lot of those guys who played in the past. They weren't very fast. But here's the point. If I'm Steve Yzerman, I mean, maybe I want to keep him, right? I mean, if I'm not going to get him that form.
I think that's possible, but that's part of a huge discussion about Glendening, who the fans like, Yzerman likes, but the question is, everybody wants him because he's a 67% face-off guy, and he can skate, and he can play against anybody in the league because he can skate. And so the thought is if you can get something for him, do you just hope that since he's a Michigan native, he'll come back? So, do you say to Stahl, wink, wink, we love you. Yeah. Come back and be part of this. You could really, be a leader on this team.
Good point. You're right. I like that. Yeah, I do that for the heartbeat. Yeah, and he's not going to command a whole lot of money, right? I mean, I don't think the market would be.
Well, but if you have a pulse now in your defenseman, you get $2.5 million.
That's true.
So
that is true. I like the way you said that. True.
Yeah, I mean, it's and it's like starting pitchers in baseball. Those guys just last forever because anybody that can log innings in the MLB, is valuable. You need guys that you can run out there who aren't going to get bombed by the second inning. Right. So,
well, what is it in Philadelphia with the goaltending? Since Ron Hextall, I should be careful. Brian Boucher was there for a while, but
it's really, it's almost like he jinxed them.
Yeah,
when they sent him in the he went in the Forsberg trade, right? To Quebec.
Yes, yeah.
So, did he curse them?
It must have been.
If anybody could lay a good curse, I would say it would be Ron Hextall.
That's true. And then he comes back. Then he comes back as a general manager, and he tries to save the day. They won't let him do it the way he wants to do it. Now he's gone. Now he's with Pittsburgh, their arch rival. So double curse there.
I think the greatest irony of Ron Hextall, who's was a cauldron of smoldering emotion at all times. When he played, like he was Vesuvius, he could erupt at any time. Yeah. And what has he been as a GM?
Mr.
Patience, Mr. Patience, draft guy. Take it slow.
Yeah, that is true.
Think about what you're doing. I mean, that's.
And when you see him speak, he's very thoughtful and careful with his words and everything. Yeah, he wasn't like that when he played. That's for sure.
Speaking of smoldering emotion, and he was part of this. I did the book obviously with Mike Emmerich, and we had at a library in Connecticut, we had a virtual discussion about the book, and Mike and I basically just sort of carried on a conversation, and then everybody could tune in and listen, and there were questions, and somebody had asked us about the biggest brawls we had ever seen, and both Mike and I went to the same brawl, and that was that Montreal Philadelphia pregame brawl started by a guy. Who was it that
Eddie Hosmer?
And the desire to shoot the puck last into the net.
You see, okay, that's a good point, but here's the difference in today's game. So there's a brawl for that. Back then, now they play rock, paper, scissors to see who's the game has changed.
Mike remembered it as only Mike would do. My wife asked me how that went after it was done, and I said, "Well, Doc," I got better as I went along, and Mike was great right from the start because he had it, and the detail he had on this, and I remember as soon as he brought it up that he was absolutely right on this. But the fact he remembered this. Yeah. Some of those guys came out and participated in that brawl in flip-flops.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, and I remembered it as soon as he said it, but that detail was lost to me. And because I was there, just like Mike was. Right. But he remembered it right off the bat.
Do you remember the four players, two from each side, that were on the ice when the brawl started?
Was Chelios on the ice?
No. It was for Montreal. It was Corson and Lemieux,
Okay.
And for Philly, it was Hospodar and Chico Resch, but we call him Chico Mesh.
Chico Resch, that's right. Yeah, he had turned the net around.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But the other one I remember too, because they wanted to know, and it was not a brawl, but it was a one-on-one battle because they asked. I think the question was phrased the scariest things you've ever seen. Right. Was a one-on-one fight between Link Getz. You remember Link?
The missing Link, yes.
And Bob Probert.
Oh,
that was a scary fight.
I remember that one too. How about the one Cox for Vancouver and Probert at Joe Louis? They stood there. Oh man.
Yeah. And the one thing about Proby that I think people he was sort of misunderstood. Like, people viewed him as sort of being a crazy fighter, but he was not. In fact, I would argue that Bob was a gentle giant.
Yes.
That he really didn't enjoy that role. It usually took him being hit 3 or 4 times before suddenly he became Probert the Ferocious.
How about the one he and Marty McSorley had at Joe Louis, where they went on and on and on, and the linesmen, that you could tell that both guys were calling him off. At the end of the fight, I think it was one of those deals that Probert respected McSorley, and they were all kind of tied up, and he kind of patted him on the head as he went away.
Yeah. I remember him patting on the head. Yeah.
Oh, man.
I'll tell you who was a wild, crazy fighter was Tony Twist.
Yeah.
Tony could get riled up. So, I wouldn't want to fight him. Darren McCarty tells a good story about he fought Twist. Now, Darren McCarty was really not a heavyweight. He was a light heavyweight.
Yeah.
But he would fight the heavyweights if called upon.
Yeah.
And he fought Twist to a draw and got a couple of lucky punches in. And Twist said, we'll go again later on.
Yeah.
And so McCarty goes, oh, God, he'll kill me this time. And so he's on the ice, and Twist is calling him out, and he's not reacting. And all of a sudden, Scotty Bowman goes to the front of the bench and yells, Darren, if you fight Tony Twist, you're done with me.
That's
so you never play another shift.
Right.
So, I don't want to see any of you fighting Tony Twist again. And Darren McCarty said, sorry, Tony.
Yeah. And then he said, thanks, Scotty. Yeah. Thanks,
and then he went back and said, thanks, Scotty.
Yeah. So, I'll never forget, it's funny, like those guys are fighters like that. When McSorley first came up and he was in Pittsburgh and I fought him, and I didn't really know who he was. Nobody knew who he was at that point. And and I say this as a total compliment to him because he made himself into a player later on, but he was awful out there. Like, he could barely skate. So, and he had to fight all the time, and he was determined he was going to play in the NHL, so he's going to fight everybody. And then once I fought him, every game we played against him after that, nothing was going on. He'd just come over to me, Laidlaw, let's go. Laidlaw, let's go. Because he knew I fought him before, so he figured I'd fight him again. I finally said to him, I said, listen, I'm not fighting you anymore. I'm not keeping you in the league. That's
it's not my job.
Yeah.
Well, Jeremy Roenick, that was his first fight, was against McSorley.
Oh.
And he tells the story of he's getting ready to throw off his gloves, and he hears everyone on the bench going, no! And he said by then it was too late.
That was when George Lafitte came up. So I played against George in college. He was at Bowling Green, and I didn't know how tough he was because we couldn't fight in college. But he's yipping at me all the time, and and I'm thinking, I think I was a senior when he came in, or a junior or something. I'm like, I'm thinking I'm the toughest guy on the planet at this point. I don't know how tough he is. And so we got up to the NHL. He'd been to Myers for a little bit. They called him up to play. We're going to play against the Islanders, and he squared off with Bob Nystrom. So I thought, this kid's going to get killed. He doesn't know who Nystrom is. So I jump in between the two of them, and George is mad at me. He's like, "What are you doing?" Like, so both go to the penalty box to get 2 minutes for roughing or something. They come out of the penalty box and they go at it, and it was one heck of a fight. And George didn't necessarily beat him, but he didn't get beat either. And then I realized, I guess this guy's a little bit tougher than I thought he was. So he was tough too.
Yeah, I read on social media just one little note, which. And I've known this for a while. He was, when my daughter was sick, George Lafitte was always very kind and always asked about her and so forth. So I knew what a caring man he was. But Barry Beck was talking about, he lost his son recently.
Yeah. And
he was talking about that George Lafitte was one of the few teammates that called him, directly.
Yeah.
Barry Beck's in China. So that's not an easy reach, So,
and they probably haven't seen each other in decades.
Yeah, but that's George.
Yeah, George is great. He is great that way. Yeah,
like George was as tough of a hockey player, pound for pound, he was as good a fighter as you're going to find.
I remember, and you were part of this. Remember, he was the GM in Washington, and in a preseason game, I think against Chicago, he got in a fight downstairs outside the locker rooms.
Oh yeah,
remember that? And you called me up for some quotes because I played with him, and I said I can tell you exactly what happened. I said these guys probably looking at George. He's this tiny little guy, and they're thinking they're going to run all over top of him, and he's not backing down from anybody. And I talked to him after. That's exactly what happened. They went at it.
Yeah, I mean, like he was, if you're using a boxer analogy, he was like Sugar Ray Leonard trying to fight Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
Like he fought bigger guys.
Oh, totally.
But he was a really skilled fighter.
Yeah.
So he could fight up.
Oh yeah,
so,
absolutely. Yeah.
So anyway, we've gone a long time. I guess. Did you miss me, Tom? I was gone.
I actually did. Yes, I had Darren Veach on the show. Darren and I.
Probably interesting.
Yes, he was very interesting. We would comparing our cooking on Facebook. He does a lot of cooking as well. So we chatted a little bit, and he started telling me his story. I didn't know where he'd played after NHL career. He was in Phoenix and Europe and all over. So yeah, he's an interesting guy.
How did he feel about butter in your fish?
I think he was okay with it. He isn't like he's got healthy food that he's cooking, but he doesn't necessarily. It isn't all healthy. I think it goes for the flavor of it. Yeah, that was a struggle there. I had the butter there, and I thought, and actually, I was funny. I was thinking about your wife. Like, what's she going to think about me putting butter in my fish?
Yeah, well, she uses a little butter. She prefers obviously olive oil, but because that's just healthier. But that was a real good looking meal you had there.
Yes, I've gotten much better with my presentation too. Like it takes me a while to get it all cleaned up and on the plate. Right.
Well, but the other thing too is you weren't a big fan of asparagus, and you serve that quite often now.
Yes, you know what? I've changed my tune. The problem was, and I love my Costco, but the problem with Costco is the asparagus that I have there is thicker. So when you cook it, it gives you that texture that's not very good. You got to get the skinnier stuff. So and I put in the air fryer now too, so fry it up a little bit.
Well, I'm going to give you a tip. Not anything that I know, but I heard my wife talking to my daughter about it. We had at Easter dinner yesterday here in South Carolina something that my daughter makes called a asparagus tart. Oh. And it's got cheese and a pastry, and it was really, really good. Right. But my wife was talking to my daughter about that when you break asparagus, like you tend to want to cut it up,
right?
And you need to find it talks is what she says. It talks to you. You hold it, and when you snap it, it sort of as it bends, you'll get to the point where it snaps.
Oh,
and then you don't have those like some hard pieces and some whatever. So anyway,
you had some sweet. You had in your post there something about sweet potatoes too. What kind of sweet potato was it?
We had a sweet. Apparently, one of the they don't eat particularly healthy here in South Carolina
right.
So I'm not sure you would appreciate this, but the Kelsey's mother-in-law, Carol Sanders, brought a sweet potato cake. Now I've heard of sweet potato pie,
right,
but I had never heard of a sweet potato cake.
Right.
And it's just an iced cake, but it's made out of sweet potato, and it's not like pie. It's like regular cake.
Oh, what did you shred up the sweet potatoes?
Pardon me?
They shred the
Yeah. It was quite good. It's no different when you think about it than carrot cake.
Yeah, sure.
You grind up the carrots and so forth. So, but it was quite good, and we've had grits down here a couple of times.
I don't know. I've never had grits. I've never had it.
Yeah. My wife's not a huge fan of them, but she knew how to cook them. She was suggested that you add a little milk to them at the end to give them sort of a creamy texture. And we're having a barbecue tonight. So
nice.
We're having some barbecue, but I'm more interested in the sides because they have green beans cooked down here, which it's the one debate my wife and I do not agree on. She likes her green beans hardened, like barely cooked, and I like mine cooked down, as they say, with a little fat in them. Yeah, right. So that's a big difference. But we're gonna have some barbecue. There'll be some we're having sweet potato crunch. They have add nuts to it. So we'll have that.
I made a sweet potato waffle one time. That was excellent. It was really
Yeah. Oh, yeah. My wife makes those too. She'll make a waffle. She makes actually an egg waffle too, where she uses her waffle maker and she cooks the eggs in it with vegetables.
good. Oh, nice.
Yeah. So that's well, we moved into the cooking
There you
show. Anyway, well, we appreciate you joining us. Please catch me in my writing at hockeybuzz.com. I have another podcast on Tuesdays and Thursdays with Bob Duff on hockeydebates.com, 4:00.
And you can catch the radio version of this show on 365 Sports on radio.co. Again, that's 365 Sports on radio.co. And we'll see you guys on Wednesday.
Have a good week.